Hello, everyone. I hope you guys had a lovely, speedy spring break. So this week we are doing paper workshops. Your first draft is coming up. The due date that will be due next week on the 26th on Friday. And then the following week, your peer review will be due. So just let me sort of clarify exactly what we're doing with this, and then we'll get started. What you need to do for next Friday, you will be submitting your peer review, or I'm sorry, your first draft of this paper along with your rainbow outline, so that we can all see kind of your thought process and where this is going. So your rainbow outline, we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and then we'll sort of double check everybody's progress on that on Wednesday. So we'll go over that. And you'll also need to have your draft actually typed up. So you're going to submit that online on Canvas, and Canvas has a feature for allowing peer reviews. I've never used it before. We're going to see how this goes. Basically, when you submit it, it automatically sends it to another student who, hold on, my computer is lagging a little bit. It automatically sends it to another student. So you should get a notification that you have a paper to review in Canvas. And again, just kind of keep me posted how this is going. Like if you guys aren't getting notifications or you can't find the paper, don't worry about that. We'll work this out. If we need to push the deadline back for that peer review, this is very fluid since this is the first time I'm using this. But Michelle Moss over at CRMJ is very helpful and very speedy about responses. So we will figure this out. But according to Canvas, you're going to submit it. It will automatically send the document to another student who will then have a week to review it. So what I want to make sure that you do when you submit your draft is not have your name on it, because it's supposed to be a double blind review. Like you're not supposed to know who's reviewing you, and you're not supposed to know who you're reviewing. So this is very similar to the scholarly journal acceptance format protocol. Every time I submit an article for publication, I have to submit a blind copy, which means myself or my co-authors' names cannot be on it, and no identifying information can be included in it. So for instance, in one of my publications from grad school, we had gotten a grant from the Department of Corrections, and the grant was given to Florida State University, and I had to take that part out and say a large Southern university, so people couldn't associate who it could potentially be. So for you guys, what you'll do, just don't have your name on the draft or the rainbow outline. I'll be able to see who it is because it'll be under your name. So don't worry about that. But what we don't want is, I don't want the peer reviewers to know who they're reviewing. So we'll kind of figure this out as it goes, but it's supposed to give you a notification, and you should be able to see it right there. Also, please, is it possible for everyone to submit it in a Word document so that we can do track changes? Does everybody have access to Word? Does anybody not have access to Word? That's what I should ask. We're all good? Like nobody uses Google Docs exclusively? Like we can all use Word? All right. So on Friday, the thing that we're going to be talking about with the paper workshop is how to do a peer review. So I'll be going over the things that you'll be looking for. And if you've never used track changes, I'll show you how to use that. So that's kind of the goal for what's coming up. You'll submit that draft. It should go automatically to you. You'll have another week to go through the peer review. What I'm going to do is go through each draft after the peer reviewer, and I'll also be making my edits on top of that so that you can see things that I suggested as well as your peer reviewer. And if there's anything, like if your peer reviewer suggested something that was incorrect, I might just strike through that. You will be graded on your peer review as well. I'm not going to be harshly grading. The only thing I'm really looking for you to not do is be derogatory or rude, or if you're continuously making suggestions that I tell you on Friday are things not to suggest, that might be how you could lose some points. Also, if you don't make any suggested edits at all, that could be where you lose points. If one of your peer draft or the draft that you're looking at is so good that you don't have any suggestions to make, just shoot me an email and I can sort of walk you through it. But what I don't want you to do is just completely give up and then be upset that you get a bad grade because you didn't make any edits. Let me help you with that. I'm happy to make some suggestions for that. All right, so do we have any questions about that before we get started today? We're all good? Okay, so today what I wanted to do was kind of see your progress on the paper thus far. Although this day really crept up on us, we had spring break. I'm assuming, being that I was a college student once, that there has been not a lot of considerable progress on the paper. So what I'm going to suggest is today we'll just kind of go over the rainbow outline again. And then what I was going to do on Wednesday was I have a little PowerPoint about how to put it all together in some common mistakes that I see when I'm grading undergraduate papers. So what I think I'll do is go over that today. And then on Wednesday, I'll check back with the progress on that. How about that? Does that sound good? Okay. All right. So by Wednesday, what I would definitely like to see, everybody needs to have both of their articles and at least have begun their rainbow outline. And when we go over the rainbow outline, I'll show you what I'd like to see from everybody on Wednesday, okay? All right. So let me pull this up. And if you're having trouble finding this rainbow outline document, it's in the modules, the week that we did our first paper workshop. But I can also just send you guys an email of this document. That might just be easier. So I'll make a note to do that as well. All right, so you're going to have to submit this with your first draft and your final draft because I want to be able to see your progress towards the end. Hold on. Okay. Zanaya, I see that you're having some problems. Just shoot me an email and I will send you a recording of the class since it seems like it's glitching on your end, okay? All right, so this is personally how I write papers, and this is how I teach my students to write papers, and it's just an easy way to keep track of your citations. So once you have an article, what I'd like to see is the full citation at the top right here. And then as you start reading through the articles, you're going to start copying and pasting in the information that you would like to include in your paper. So I definitely recommend copying and pasting because, like I said before, when I was an undergrad, I would copy and paste some of it, and other times I would just kind of paraphrase it, and then I couldn't remember what I had paraphrased and what was their words. So if you just copy and paste everything, when you get ready to write your draft up, you know that all of this has to be paraphrased in your own words. It's also faster if you do this too. I'll just start reading stuff and I'm like, ooh, I like this. I like this. I'll take this whole paragraph and move this over. And then you can kind of go through it later. Hold on, let me respond. Sorry, Zanaya cannot hear us at all. Okay. All right. So as you're starting to read through it, if you realize that you're pulling a lot of information that's like, it could go under a specific subheading, like if you're pulling stuff that is all historical background, like you can see right here, 1792, 1944, 1975, all of that stuff was sort of historical background of animal programs. So I just popped a heading under on top of that. Uh-oh. My thing is glitching now. Oh boy, I think I need to restart my computer. Okay, so you're just going to start copying and pasting. As you see natural topics or headings pop up, I would just put it in there. So you're going to do that for one article, and then you're going to do that for another article. You'll put the citation at the top right here, and you'll start copying and pasting the stuff that you want from your second article. The example that I give is just 3 articles right here. So once you've done that, you're going to create your master outline. And this is the reason that you want them in separate colors, is so that you know who to cite in text once you start typing it up. That makes it so much more simple than having to scroll back up and see who said what. If you just have each article in a separate color, once you make this rainbow outline, it's really simple once you start typing to know who to cite in text. So you can see right here, I started my master outline with a historical background, which came from that first blue source. But then you can see right here that I mentioned this first successful animal therapy program. And the blue source only had a little bit of information about that, but I wanted more information on that. So the red source is actually that article about that first successful animal program, which I pulled all about that specific program right here. And then when I'm discussing it in text, I included the red down here so that I would know to cite Lee 1975. Then we went back with some more historical background until I get to this part right here about this horse training program in Colorado in the 70s. And that was my third article. I pulled that specific article. And you can see right here, I mentioned this program. And then my third color under here was the article I pulled specifically about that program. So what you might find when you're doing the research is that you're pulling some information from an article and it mentions some other program or phenomenon or topic, and they just mention it in passing, but you would like to expand on that. Or what you might find is that if you just mention it in passing, and when I get a hold of your paper, I might say, you need more information on that. What I recommend is seeing who they cited, and then you can pull that source. And that's why the rainbow outline can be very helpful, where you see that my first source just mentioned this program, but it didn't tell me about it. I had to actually pull an article about that program so that I was able to elaborate on that.
So we're basically like, so for some of them, we might have to do different findings to get a little bit more information on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm requiring a minimum of 2 sources, but depending on what you focus on, as I'm reading through your paper, if you mention a very complex topic, but you don't, give me any more details about it, like the paper seems kind of blank without it, or, it's missing something. So you might need to pull another source just to get like 3 more sentences on what this topic is, right? So, don't be freaking out like, oh, I might need more than 2 sources. Sometimes, like, I just pulled these 2 sources for like 4 lines of text. I'm not saying that you need to use the entire article, but you might just need like a couple sentences from it to help explain that topic.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is a good technique to perfect right now when you're only required to use 2 sources. When you start getting into like 300 and 400 level classes, you're probably going to be assigned papers that require more, 5 or more sources. And this technique can be very helpful keeping track of who said what. All right, questions about this rainbow outline? All right, so on Wednesday, what I would like to see is something that looks like this. I want to see your original, what you've pulled, and then how you've sort of melted it together like this. Does that make sense? Philip, it looks like it just clicked for you.
Yeah, it clicked for me now. I got it.
Okay, yeah. So for your 2 sources, what you want to see is the full citation at the top. That's going to save you some work in the back end, because when you submit that draft, you'll also have to have your reference section. And if you already have your full citation up here, you simply have to copy and paste it at the end and make the text black again. Sometimes when I'm being really lazy, I'll just put the in-text citation. So I'll write like Lee 1987, and then I wind up kicking myself later. I got to find that source and pull the full citation. So since you're only doing 2, maybe 3 sources, 4 at most, I don't think you're going to need to do that. I would just go ahead and put it up here at the beginning so that you just save yourself some work at the end. So yours should kind of look like this. You see your 2 articles right here. You've got your full citation, the information that you want to use. We'll have them in 2 separate colors. And then I want to see your master outline, how you've sort of melted those 2 together.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One of them being, so with your information, did you paraphrase or pull out from the text? And if you did, in our rainbow outline, do you want us to use the in-text citation on the end of each sentence that we paraphrase or pulled out from?
No. So for the outline, both of these are all copied and pasted direct quote from that paper, right? And the reason that I'm color coding them is so that I don't have to write, you know, Lee 1987 right here, Lee 1987 right here, Lee 1987. This is your outline. When you're ready to actually type your paper up, you're going to paraphrase all of that, and that's when you're going to be putting in your in-text citations. So as I start writing this, I know that all of this blue, I need to cite one source. All of this red is a different source that I cite. And if you copy and paste everything from the articles that you pull, you know everything has to go in your own words later.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just confused about that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Other questions about this? Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is share a PowerPoint that I share with my intro students. So this is a PowerPoint that I created after grading the first draft of their papers. And it was basically common problems that I kept seeing from my students. So this is more about what you're going to do after you've created that master outline. Once you have to start writing things in your own words, these are some problems that I saw. And some of them may not really apply to you, like organization, because I didn't used to force my students to make a rainbow outline beforehand. So a lot of them would just start typing without kind of an idea of what they were saying, what was, you know, structured, what should be said next, you know, in what order. So hopefully creating an outline, we won't see some of these same problems. But a lot of them had to do with just how you're phrasing things. So I saw a lot of redundant phrasing. So if you look at this sentence right here, this was their sentence. They said, for the past few years, there has been a lot of reports against cops containing video evidence of police brutality. This is due to the popular smartphone. Since there are more eyes on the street due to these phones, there is a lot more the world can see. So it's just like a lot of words. So I fixed the sentence to read, for the past few years, the increase of smartphone use has led to a lot of negative media attention on police officers, including video evidence of police officers using extreme or deadly force. Since there are more eyes on the street, there is a lot more the world can see. So I just removed sort of this redundancy of the phones right here, and they were kind of dancing around the negative report. So I just said it a little bit more clearly. So be careful you're not using the same phrase over and over and over again. I see that a lot. Another problem that I saw that hopefully won't be an issue with you guys is students would give me a direct quote from the article, and then the sentence after it, they paraphrased it, which doesn't make any sense. What I would like to do is remove that direct quote and just have you guys paraphrase. So a solution to that is, you know, if they say a direct quote and it's something that you really want to include, you can include a direct quote as long as it's not like more than a sentence or two. I shouldn't be seeing a block paragraph of a direct quote. That's an example of something that you can paraphrase. And when it comes to direct quotes, it's rare that you need one. The example I always give is like, you wouldn't paraphrase part of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, right? But aside from other things like that, you can really paraphrase. So occasionally you might want to embed like a phrase that they say they really like. And then if you need to elaborate on that by paraphrasing, you can say in other words, and then elaborate on what that means or why that's important for your topic. But I should not be seeing, if I see more than one direct quote, more than 2 direct quotes in a 2-page paper, that's too many direct quotes. This should mainly be paraphrased. Another question I get a lot, sometimes students feel like they have to use a direct quote when numbers are involved, and that's not the case. So they get really confused, like, I don't know how else to say 25%. And you can use the number 25%, just don't say the sentence exactly how they say it. So for instance, if they say mass incarceration increased by 25% over the last 30 years, you could say, in the last 30 years, we've seen an increase in mass incarceration by 25%. So just because numbers, whether it be a year or a percentage or a raw number, is in the phrase you want to use, that doesn't mean it requires a direct quote. You can still say the number again, just say the sentence differently. All right, there's a lot of pros in here. Oh, I think my computer's freezing again. Yep, hold on. Okay. All right. So informal phrasing. So be careful about typing the way that you speak. I would see a lot of students say, this is saying that, which don't say that. That sounds terrible. You can say in other words instead of that. Or whatever is going to be crazy for a while. Don't say that. You can say, this will likely be chaotic. Also, it has to do with how a person is mentally. I feel like we can say that more eloquently. Mental illnesses have the potential to affect, whatever. Whoa, computer's frozen again. I didn't shut it down over the weekend, and I think that's the problem. Okay, let's talk about how you embed an in-text citation in your paper. So students will say something like, the types of people affected in Douglas Evans and Cynthia Williams' article. So first of all, you never need to say the first and last name of an author. That should not be part of the sentence. So the way that you would phrase that is Evans and William, and then either the page number if you're going to use a direct quote, or I'd like for you guys to use APA. It's just easier. So Evans and Williams in the year indicate the types of people, blah, blah, blah. So if you want to use an in-text citation in the sentence, don't say the first and last name. Sometimes I also will see people will say in Douglas Evans and Cynthia Williams article titled this in this journal. Don't do that. That's what the reference section is for. You're just going to give the sentence just like this. If you want to start the sentence with the citation, Evans and Williams year indicate that this. So again, they'll say things like, according to an article titled, don't do that. You don't need to do that. Just give me the in-text citation. So you just paraphrase it and then author year or author page number, whichever format you're using. So there's 2 ways that you can do in-text citations here. Just like this, you're going to paraphrase it, and at the end, you're going to say author year or author page number in parentheses, or you can start the sentence with the 2 last names and then put the page number or the year in parentheses and then begin paraphrasing it. But you shouldn't be, saying first and last name of the author within the sentence or embedding the title. That is very informal and indicative of writing that needs improvement. Okay, so choppy, bizarre phrasing. Here's an example of a student So a major obstacle in solving murders where the body is not found at the beginning of the investigation comes from people who have gone missing but are not reported missing due to the victim not keeping a regular schedule. So if you have to take a deep breath once or twice while you're saying the sentence out loud, that's probably a run-on sentence. But also this just doesn't sound great. So a way that I fixed it was a major obstacle when solving murders in which there is no body found is locating people who have gone missing but are not reported missing due to keeping an irregular schedule. So you see how there's hardly any punctuation in here, and this could have been split into 2 sentences. I took out a lot of words and just added a comma. You could also have turned that into 2 sentences. Whether or not, that is always grammatically incorrect. You can just say whether. Most people say whether or not when they're talking, but when you are writing, whether or not is always grammatically incorrect. And if you try it out, it makes sense. So if you're saying, it depends on whether or not the victim was missing. It depends on whether the victim was missing. It's the same end. It means the same thing. So you never need to say whether or not in a paper. So if you see that I have written that something was, so when I start editing your paper and when you edit papers too, if you're seeing that the sentence is, oddly phrased, that can be a quote or, a suggestion that you make, or you can just say, say more eloquently. But you don't need to go in and change the sentence for someone. If the sentence just sounds kind of choppy or bizarre, you can say that it's oddly phrased, or that you can recommend that they say it more eloquently. Generally, what I will do is if I keep seeing the same weirdly phrased things, I'll probably fix a sentence or 2 to show you how to say it more eloquently. But then after that, I'll just be saying this is oddly phrased, or you need to say this more eloquently. The best advice I was ever given by my favorite professor, who is the most beautiful writer I've ever seen in my entire life, is to read your paper out loud. This is something that cannot be overstated. If you've never tried it before, I'm telling you, it makes such a difference. Your brain, if you're reading something just in your head, your brain will skip over small grammatical errors. If you read it out loud, you will catch so many errors. So before you submit anything, read it out loud. And when you're editing people's papers, read it out loud. You will catch the weird phrases. Anytime I'm working with a student one-on-one with a paper and I see a weird phrase, I will ask them to read it out loud. They start reading it out loud and they'll say, oh, whoa, I didn't mean to say that. Or, oh, I've used the wrong tense there. I can't tell you how important that step is. It makes such a difference. So acronyms. I see these mistakes a lot. So the proper way to use an acronym, you write it out first, and then you put the acronym in parentheses, and then you can use the acronym for the rest of the paper. So for instance, the mouse is gone. Ooh, where'd it go? There it is. So this is an excerpt from my dissertation, dog training programs. Then I put DTPs in there, and then you can just say DTPs for the rest of the paper. But that is the proper way to do it. I see a lot of students that will just embed acronyms and never tell the reader what it means. Or they will use an acronym and then halfway through the paper tell the reader what it means. But this is the proper way you use it. The first time you say it, you write it out, you put it in parentheses, and then you can use the acronym for the rest of the paper. If you're writing a really, really long paper, like for instance, my dissertation had like 7 chapters, at the beginning of each chapter, I did this. But for a 2-page paper or like even a 5-page paper, I think that would be fine. If you've got like a 10-page paper with multiple sections, you might want to do it like this at the beginning of every section. Vague statements. So here's where I think you might need to find another source. If you say something like, the government also provides direct payment to the firm, which creates a minimum cost for certain things. what things? Like if your source only mentions certain things and they give you a citation, if I see a sentence like that, like you're clearly missing information. Like you're going to have to either go back to that source and see if they tell you what those things are. And if not, if they give you a citation, you'll have to track that citation down to tell me what these certain things are. So specify. However, research indicates that serious mental illness contributes little to mass murder-related incidents that have occurred within the past decade. Oop, froze again. Provide the figure, right? So if you're saying that they've contributed very little, I'd like to know that number. So very little could mean, you know, are we talking 1%? Are we talking 5%, 10%? That we need to know that number. Unnecessary phrasing. So the Fourth Amendment being the main one due to the fact that when reading it and looking at the bill, the reader sees that it protects from searches and wiretaps unless there is probable cause allowing law enforcement to get a warrant. You can get rid of the entire center of that sentence. So it would read so much better. The Fourth Amendment protects from searches and wiretaps unless there is probable cause allowing law enforcement to get a warrant. So just be wary of phrases like this. This is very informal and you don't need that. So just a reiteration on citations. Again, this is the first year that I'm teaching you, I'm forcing you guys to learn how to cite in text, mainly because I saw so many problems with it in the previous semesters I've taught this. I would have students that would, you know, submit an entire 5-page paper without a single citation, and that is plagiarism. Every single thing that you are copying and pasting from your source needs to be cited. So if you got a fact from a source, you need to cite it. If you got a sentence from a source, you need to cite it. Again, I shouldn't be seeing in a 2-page paper, 2 direct quotes is excessive. We don't need that. If you look through the articles that you're pulling, you may not find a single direct quote. It's very rare. I think you see direct quotes a lot more with like English papers where, you know, you're interpreting, you know, a phrase that they said. But in social science research, we don't use direct quotes unless it's almost required. If you are going to use a direct quote, remember you need that page number if you're using APA. So this is what I also had a lot of students be confused about the difference between an in-text citation and a full reference. So your reference section should have the full citation just like this. And then you should also have your in-text citations, you know, the parentheses, author, year. So for instance, this is a reference and then in text right here. A little note about et al. This means and colleagues. So you see right here, we've got 3 authors. If you've got 3 or more authors, when you cite it in text, you can just say the first author et al. If you want to write the sentence out, so you know how I showed you previously, you can say Evans and Williams author said this, this, and this. If you're going to start a sentence that would have an et al, what you would say is Hill and colleagues 2017. Don't say et al unless it's within this in-text citation. If you're going to use the author in the actual sentence, et al should be replaced with and colleagues. And then I included the Purdue OWL link right here, which I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with. And this is why your citation assignment was open book, because, you know, I still check on these things. So if you forgot how to do that full in-text citation in APA format, look at Purdue OWL. And that's also something that you guys should be looking at for your peer review drafts. If the person didn't cite their reference section properly, those are changes that you can make. We already kind of went over paraphrasing, and that was part of the thing, one of the assignments I had you do, but in the past, I had a lot of students have trouble with paraphrasing. You guys did a fantastic job with it. So I don't really think, we need to go into this, but just a few tricks. You can combine several sentences together. You can move the front of the sentence to the back and vice versa. And then the right click synonym trick, like I showed you, if you're having trouble coming up with another word like that, just be careful that you're not right click synonyming like every single word in the sentence, because that you're going to skate awfully close to plagiarizing if you do that. And one note about paraphrasing and citation, if your entire paragraph is from one citation, you don't need to put your in-text citation after every sentence. You can phrase it so that you are telling the reader this whole sentence or this whole paragraph came from one source. So you could say, for instance, Evans and Williams 2017 explained the concept of so-and-so. And then in the next sentence, you can say they continued by, they elaborated, they clarified. You can bring a they or he or she, whoever that author is, down a couple of times so that you don't have to put, a citation after every single sentence if the whole paragraph is from that author, if that makes sense. So we'll just quickly go over organization. I don't imagine that this will be much of an issue for you guys because I'm going to have you create that master outline in advance. That should take care of the organizational issues, but this may be helpful when you're peer reviewing. You can pay attention. So if somebody is jamming too many topics into one paragraph, you can recommend that they split the paragraph into separate topics. And a way that you can fix this is what I usually recommend if I'm telling a student that there's too much information in one paragraph is if you can't write one word or phrase next to that paragraph, that means it needs to be separated into separate paragraphs, that you've got too much information jammed into one paragraph. And if what you're finding is that when you separate it, each paragraph is only a sentence or two, that means you need more information to fill out that paragraph. So organization of the paper or the argument. So you can look at the words written next to each of those paragraphs and you can organize them, organize the paper or organize it so it's laid out logically, right? So if you're seeing that your historical information is in the middle of the paper and it starts with current information, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You might want to flip-flop those paragraphs. If you were using an argument, I don't think, maybe Tristan or maybe Jamarcus, one of you guys was talking about maybe doing the pros and cons of the death penalty. Was that one of you?
That was me.
Okay. So for you, what I would say is you're going to present both sides of the argument, and then you're going to discuss which is correct and why. So you're going to start with like either the retentionist argument and then go into abolitionist. What you should not be doing is presenting, two abolitionist arguments and then a retention and then an abolitionist, right? We want to make sure we're grouping them together. So you could do your abolitionist, then your retentionist, then a paragraph on which is correct and then why, if that makes sense. Okay, so you're always going to want to start with the statement of the problem or description of the problem. We shouldn't be seeing that in the middle of the paper. So if I think Lane, maybe you wanted to talk about prison-based rehabilitation programs, right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay,
so most of your articles are going to start with a statement of the problem, and you should do that as well. you shouldn't be starting by describing a dog training program and then in the middle of the paper telling me why we need them, right? Like you're going to want to start with why do we need this problem? So it's our program. So it's like recidivism is high, empathy is low in prison, so on and so forth. Solution, dog training programs, right? Okay, so that was a lot of information. We can reiterate that again. When we start, I'm going to pull this PowerPoint up again, and we're going to go through some of the more important points. When we start talking about the peer reviews, I'll give you guys some hints about things to focus on, some ways to phrase things so that you don't sound like an asshole when you are critiquing someone else's paper, so on and so forth. So, do we have any questions? No questions. Okay, so on Wednesday, what I'd like to do is check everybody's progress. So by Wednesday, make sure you've got your 2 articles and your rainbow outline. And I want to see, you know, the citation with the stuff that you copied for one article in one color, other article in another color. And then I want to see how you've melted that information below. Okay. All right. If you need any help with that, please send me an email. I'm happy to Zoom with you and help you with all of this, okay? All right, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.